But while we're waiting, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Ireland Herrera. I'm going to be helping to facilitate this webinar. And then in the screen that you can see is Melanie Rayburn. So she is going to be your instructor today, and she is going to be painting the California poppies, the beautiful mission poppies that we have on site here. If you have any questions, also feel free to put it in the comments below and I can go ahead and answer them. If you have any questions for Melanie too, I can also ask Melanie the questions that you have for her. But we can go ahead, it's about 20 or so seconds. We can go ahead, Melanie, and we can get started.
Okay. Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for our virtual art classes that we've started offering here at the Mission. Again, my name is Melanie, and today we're going to be painting the poppies. I have our sample we'll be working from today. It's a nice, simple watercolor painting. For your materials today, you'll want to have watercolor paper, watercolor paints. Obviously, I am just using Crayola because they're actually pretty good quality and really cheap, which is nice. Make sure you have some water, a nice thin paintbrush, pencil, and then I like to have a straight edge. I'm going to use this frame, but if you have some sort of straight edge, some sort of rectangle shape, just so then we can trace out this kind of frame we're going to do. That would be another thing that I would have with you today. Let me flip around my camera to our setup here. So I got my paints and my paper here. And first we're going to obviously do a quick sketch of our image we will be painting. Does the framing look okay, Ireland?
Yes, so far everything looks really good, Melanie. Everything's in frame, so everything looks perfect.
Okay, all right. So again, a straight edge. I have this from a like a frame that I took out of the picture frame. I really like it because it has like a standard size that I can use. So straight edge, we're going to take our watercolor paper. I'm going to do mine this direction. And we're just going to make a rectangle shape. Now, again, if you have like a book or something, you can just use that. The size really doesn't matter. I'm going to do the inner, try to get it square. And if you just have a ruler, say, you can just, do some measurements, but I'll get everyone to have that just nice rectangle. That'll be the frame that our poppies are going to be coming out of. I'm going to lower a little bit more. There we go. So we'll give everyone a second to do that. We're just going to do a light sketch of got about 5 poppies we will paint today. And if you haven't visited the Mission in the last, say, 2 or 3 weeks, all our poppies are in bloom right now, and they're so beautiful and bright and happy. It's definitely worth seeing because you really can't see so many poppies in one place, or at least I haven't anywhere near here. So it's really special to see that, our state flower. So we're kind of doing this image coming out of the frame. So I'm going to start actually at the top with my 2 poppies that are the highest point. The first one's kind of not opened up quite yet. So I'm going to kind of do like a gentle curve line. I'm going to bring some lines coming in like it's a petal. Some lines coming down to the side. I'm going to have it end just right inside my frame. So kind of like that. I don't know how exactly you describe that shape, but it looks like a flower. At the base, I'm going to do kind of a little oval where the poppy petals meet the stem. Now for my other poppy over here, I'm going to start with my petal shape a bit lower. I'm gonna do the top, do a nice gentle curve coming around. And these don't have to be perfect shapes. Again, these are like natural petal shapes, so they fall and open. Obviously, you can see I went through my frame there, so I'm going to make sure I just erase so I know the poppy is going to be on top. There's one petal. And I am using light lines because I don't want them to stand out after I paint. So watercolor does show the pencil lines. Now, right above my petal, I'm going to do like a curved, like almost a horseshoe shape, and then I'm going to bring it down. And then from the edge here, I'm going to bring a line gently down and around. So it kind of looks like that petal's curving around on the inside. And then just kind of behind them, I'm going to come up and over and bring another petal behind. There we got two. Just like this first one, I'm going to do a little oval at the bottom where our petals meet our stem. And I'm going to erase any more of that frame line that I have inside. And actually, now that I'm kind of looking at it, I want this to be a little more gentle coming down. Kind of goes to right angle right there. So our next three poppies are going to be down in here. And this one is super opened up. You can see the four petals opened up. And we'll do that one next. We'll start with what would be the closest petal to us. We're just going to do, and I do want a little bit coming out of the frame over here. So I'm going to move it over. Just going to do kind of like a wavy, almost like an M, or like how you would draw a bird shape. Maybe do it a little smaller on one side and a little bigger on the other. And I'm going to just bring those down like that. And then coming off the side here, I'm going to do what would be the inside of the petal. So just kind of almost copycatting the first line I did, like so. And it looks a little weird now, but once we make this side a bit darker and this side will be lighter, it'll make sense that that's the bottom of our petal. And I might actually even bring mine in a little bit more. So now we'll do the petal opening up this way. I'm going to come from kind of the dip here. I'm going to do a nice gentle curving line coming out and over like so. The one in the back here, I'm going to start with the top of it. I'm going to make sure it goes over my frame. I'm going to just do kind of like a slight wiggle line. I'm going to curve the sides and bring the petal gently down. Actually, I want this to stick out a little bit more. You know, you guys can work with your shapes, how your petals are turning out, make them look a little bit more petally. The poppies do kind of have a bit of a squareness to them. So if you want to kind of highlight the more squareness, that's helpful. Now the last petal over here, it's actually going to overlap this other one. I'm going to bring it out. I'm going to do a wiggle line coming back. And then I'm going to erase the other petal because I want it overlapping. And then erase my frame as well. So we got 3 of our poppies. We'll do the one over here next. And we're gonna add in all the stems after. So this one is gonna be coming out of our frame over here on this side. I'm gonna start with kind of the triangle base. So down here, oh, we can add our oval here at the bottom. So our kind of triangle base, and then we're gonna do kind of like a curved, thin little oval shape. Like that there on the side. That's the petal flipping over. And then we'll go up and over, and we're gonna do the same thing on this side, kind of, so we can see both sides of our petal. Now this one's gonna come out from here, gentle line out and around. We got a middle petal, same thing. And then that one, I'm gonna have it kind of pointing off to the side. Again, you can draw your petals how you like. Poppies can, you know, take a variety of shapes with their petals depending on the wind and weather. They typically don't open up very big if it's very cloudy, so does not have to be perfect. At the base, I'm gonna do another oval shape. And then one more down here at the bottom. So this one's gonna start with a petal opening up to the side. So I'm gonna do kind of a curving, arcing line. It's gonna come to a little bit of a rounded point, and it's gonna get basically fatter towards the bottom. And then from here, I have a line coming out and another one coming right below it. Same thing over here. I'm gonna start with a gentle curve line, meets there. Bring this side up, and then it's gonna hook around and come down right through the middle. So there we are with our flowers. Gonna add my oval at the base. And then our stems, or our, you know, kind of leaves of our poppies. All the poppies, let's see. These 4 are all gonna come from one stem. We're gonna have a separate stem for this flower, and then we'll do like another little one coming out the side here. So I'm just gonna create gentle lines. I'm not gonna make them, you know, 2 lines. I'm just gonna gentle line because I'm gonna just follow it with my paint. So I'm gonna come from the middle of this flower and kind of down and around from this one. This one, come down too. And you want it to be pretty organic. You don't want it to be too straight. So we got 1, 2, this one is going behind this flower. So we got those 4 coming off that. And then this one will just come down almost right next to it. And then we'll have just the leaves coming out from here. And again, I'm not going to draw each little leaf, but I am just going to do the places where they would come off. So I know right here, right where the stem comes out, I'm going to bring one out. And then maybe I'll have one coming up. Kind of maybe right here from the base of this poppy. I'm going to do it on both sides. There. Coming out from where this poppy comes on both sides. Do one or two down here. Couple coming up and off there. And this is totally up to you. You don't have to follow me. You can, think about what looks nice in the spacing of your drawing. But again, that's just going to be where those little poppy leaves are coming out. And we're just hinting them so we have an idea when we go in with our paint. Now we're pretty much done with our drawing. We'll go ahead, fix up anything that you think you might change or not like in your painting. And we'll allow everyone to get caught up. Again, if you have any questions for me or Ireland or anything about this project, feel free to comment both on Facebook and our Zoom link chat. We can chat. All right, so we are going to start our painting with our background. It's going to be this kind of blue-green color, and we're going to do a graduated wash where it goes from our color to basically clear or just water. So I'm going to mix up a blue-green color, and I'm actually going to flip my paper over when I paint. I'm going to start with the paint and then work my way down to water. Now, when I get here, it doesn't really matter if I go over the poppies with the water, but up here in this area where it'll hit my first ones, I do want to make sure I go around because that blue-green color will kind of make our poppy look a little bit muddy. We want it to be that bright yellow-orange color. So I'm going to get my brush and my water and my paints. And I'm going to use the lid of my paint. I already actually have a bit of a blue-green color right here. I'm going to fill up, get some water over there. Watercolors, obviously the base is water, and then you add the color into it. If you want a lighter color, you have more water. If you want a darker color, you have less water. So I want this to not be super dark. Just gonna use blue-green, nice turquoisey color for this.
Hey, Melanie.
Yes.
So I had a guest in the comments saying if they can please see the color pick again.
This one?
Yes, the poppy one.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So again, the first color I'm mixing is this background wash, nice light blue-green color. And then after that, we'll go in with our yellow and orange for our poppies, but we're going to do that background first. I'll leave that in the center while I mix up my color. Now, if you think your color is maybe a little bit too intense or too bright, we can use our color wheel. If we know our color wheel, this is, more of a green color. So if I want to dull it, I would use the complementary color to green, which would be red. And that would just make it not so bright, and it'll kind of make it more towards a gray. So I'm actually going to add just a little bit of red into this. You can see it just makes it not so bright, a little more neutral going towards gray. And it's definitely really good to understand the color wheel when you're working with watercolors or any paint, to mix your color, because you think adding red to a green will make it brown, but first you're actually going to get a little bit more neutral gray colors. So I think I'm about ready for my wash. Again, I'm going to flip my picture over because in watercolor we work from top to bottom. So I'll flip this over too so we understand. And if I say started here and painted up, it wouldn't really make sense. So what we're going to do is do about, say, a third with our color. And then instead of picking up paint from here, we're going to use just our water, just our nice clean water. So I'm going to get my paintbrush full. I'm going to start at the top. I'm going to start just going straight across and making sure your paint stays wet, because if it starts to dry, you'll actually get these weird lines. So you want to always make sure your paint is wet. And I'd say don't worry about going over the lines that we did for our stems, but we are going to go around our poppy shape. And this wash, we do have to work fairly quickly. So don't be afraid to follow up. Oh, see, it already dried a little bit there. Need a lot of paint. And you see how I'm going around my poppy there, trying to stay neat in my lines. Working, once I meet the poppy, I'm gonna split, right, and go around it, but I gotta make sure I keep working on both sides because I don't want one to dry. And then kind of right around here, I'm actually gonna start going in with my water. So that's about a third. So now I'm just gonna start picking up water, and we should see a nice graduation from our darker color to basically clear. And I'm gonna go around my poppy again here. And we're just gonna bring this, we're just gonna keep getting water all the way to the top of our frame. And if yours is, say, a little bit darker, I would still just go around your poppies. Unless it's too difficult, then you can go through them. But I still have got a little bit of blue-green tint in my water. So I'm gonna go around them. So I'm almost to the top, or rather bottom. And then if you have a paper towel next to you and you see any puddles, you can dry off your brush and then go inside the puddles and kind of dry any areas that have excess water. And again, what we just did is called a graduated wash because it goes from dark to light. And I'm going to flip mine back over. Do that. So we'll let everyone catch up to here. It's a very nice color. I like that color I mixed. And you can see this paper was a little more textured. I got like a strange texture coming through. This paper, I don't know if it's higher quality or what, but it is a watercolor paper. It just doesn't have as much texture as this one did. So leave that. And next we're going to start on our poppies, which will be starting with a nice bright yellow color. So I don't know if you guys can see, my yellow here has got a little bit of green in it. So I'm gonna try to clean that out so then I don't have green poppies. That's what happens if you start going in with one color while you still got another on your brush. I'll just have to take it from the side. I think that green's stuck in there. Now for the poppies, we're gonna try to do a little bit of wet into wet, where we have wet paint and we start going into it with other wet paint. This allows just a little more gradual, natural mixing. So I'm gonna use my yellow, but then on the side here, I'm gonna make some orange, like an orangey yellow. So if you wanna use this time while our first wash is drying to mix up nice, kind of say medium orange, not the darkest orange we'll use, kind of a medium light orange. And you can either use a yellow and a little bit of red, or if you have an orange on your tray. Oh, there, I'm going in again with orange. I'm gonna make this yellow brown. On all the watercolor sets I've ever had, I always run out of yellow first. And yellow always ends up like a muddy gray color from all the mixing. So there's kind of a medium orange. I think I'm gonna work one poppy at a time. We're not gonna go to each one. We'll do one at a time. And we'll start with yellow. We're gonna paint the whole thing yellow. And then in areas that we want darker, we'll go in with our medium orange color. So areas that we would want darker would be, the bottom. If we say have a light source over here, the bottom right would be darker on each of them. And also if we can see like inner petals like this down here inside would also be darker. So we can think about that, and you could think about where you would want your light source. Do you want it in the upper right, upper left? Do you want it more, say lower, where your light's coming up? I typically almost always do upper left. I don't know why that just makes sense to me, but that's what I'm gonna do on mine. So all mine will be lighter on the upper half and darker over here on the lower right. So I'm gonna start with my yellow and make sure I have water. I'm gonna just start painting I'll do the little poppy first. Get it a nice bright yellow color. And this yellow has a little bit of green in it, so I'm gonna make sure I put orange inside it. So got the whole thing yellow, and then I'm gonna go in with my lighter orange. I'm just gonna lay it in. Just kind of dip it in where it would be a little bit darker. And you can see the wet into wet where my paint's already a bit wet. It's just blending nicely for me. Don't even really have to do it. I just kind of have to move it where I might want it. And I really only want that upper left to be my bright yellow. There's my medium orange. Now it's still pretty wet, so I'm gonna soak up some of that. You just dry your brush a bit and soak it up. I'm actually gonna go in with my orange straight from my tray and put in a little bit at the bottom here. So then it's even darker and a little bit up the side. So it's just gradually mixing itself. And then if you want it to be even a little bit darker, say at the very bottom, I would use our red. Just take a little tiny bit of red and just put it in there and allow it to mix itself. I'm pretty happy with that. I'll hold it up so you guys can see. We just got a really nice graduation from bright yellow to a medium orange, dark orange. We got a nice little petal going right here. I'm going to soak that up. There we are. And if the color changes a bit after it dries, I could always go in and darken it. One thing we can't do with watercolor though is lighten it. You've got to start with your lightest color and work dark. We can't go backwards that way. So I'm going to do the same thing for each of our other poppy petals and flowers. Start with my yellow. I'm going to work right up here. One thing to be aware of is if your paper is really wet still, you don't want to go into, that wet because it'll start to bleed. So just be aware of that. Either stay away from it, where it might be wet. Mine is okay, mine is dry. So I'm going to start this one, same thing with my bright yellow color. I'm just going to do the whole poppy. And I don't know if you guys can see, my water is a little bit green. I think that's where my green tint in this yellow is coming from. Doesn't look so bright and warm. Looks a little cooler. Can always get fresh water, but I don't have easy access to that. So we will make do. So there's the whole thing yellow. I'm going to pick up my lighter orange color. And I'm going to do most of this bottom half with my lighter orange. Just moving the paint as I would want it, imagining where the light would be. This whole side would be darker. And then probably this inner part, the lower part of the petals inside would be darker as well. Gonna go in with a little darker orange. Again, this back petal, if my light source is over here, this back petal here would be darker. So I'm going in with orange, bringing it up to the side, because the light would be able to shine inside, but it wouldn't be shining over here. I'm going to pick up a little bit of excess paint I have. I'm going to go right at the bottom, which would probably be the darkest part, with a little bit of red. And just pull it up, allowing it to mix on its own. Oops.
Hey, Melanie.
Yes.
So I had a question from one of our guests. She was asking if you can explain a little bit more with the technique you're doing about letting like the wet part dry with the colors so they don't blend.
Yeah. So on the petals, I'm doing wet into wet, where we have wet paint and we go into it with more wet paint, and it kind of just allows it to spread and mix on its own. Most watercolorists will do this technique because it just takes too long for things to dry. It's just easier to start building when it's wet, and also it kind of gives that natural flowing water look that we get from watercolors. The other thing I said was for the background, if you still have something that's wet, this is going to want to bleed out into it, changing, say, the shape you're trying to stick to. So if your background's still wet, or if you're working somewhere and something next to it's wet, the paint will start to bleed into it. So yeah, that's a little bit more about it. And it just allows you to quickly lay in paint, and you can see like it just starts mixing on its own, giving it a little more natural look. So I'm going to go a little bit darker in here at the top of that petal. And actually up here it's dried, so you can see how it kind of creates like a hard line. And I want it to blend. I don't want it to be a hard line. So I'll go in with some water and just kind of spread it out. I hope that answered our guest's question. So there you can see we got some nice color blending. So we had all yellow, and then we just went in with our oranges and a little bit of red on top of it and just allowed the paint to mix itself on the paper. And it just allows for a really natural looking gradation, basically. And there's a couple of basic washes for watercolors. You have a flat wash where you would just do one whole color over complete shape. So kind of like the yellow, if we just left that. The graduated wash, which we did in the beginning, where you go from a color and you keep adding water so it gradually lightens. And then there's also like a transition. So if you want to say, if you're painting something like a sunset and you want the top to be, say, you know, a deep purple, you would start with like a purple color, and then while it's still wet, you can slowly bring in another color, so then it transitions from one to another, and you can do that with several colors. And then finally wet into wet, where you're just working with wet paint into other wet paint. So we're just gonna keep going to all our petals coming down. My background's dried now, so I don't really have to worry about going over. And again, I'm gonna start with my yellow in this next petal. And definitely in this yellow wash, you'll want it to be wet, right? So don't be afraid to use, you know, a bit of water. I'm going straight from my tray, so I do have to kind of add more water as I pick it up, because we do want that wet into wet effect happening. So I'm like getting paint and then I'm getting a bit of water, so then it stays wet. So there we go. Gonna start in with my lighter orange, and if I'm thinking about light, down here for sure will be darker, as well as maybe this kind of inner part of this petal. And for the kind of wet into wet technique, I have noticed some difference in the paints. I actually really like this paint as it doesn't spread as easily. So then if I have like a line there and I don't want to lose it, it does do a little bit better. I don't know to what purpose. The colors aren't as vibrant with the Crayola as they are with other sets I've had, but I do just like some of the ways the paint acts. So there's my medium. I'm going to go into my next level of darkness, just straight orange. Again, thinking about where it would be darker. So down here, below that petal flipping over. Maybe a little more in here. The inside of that one. And the lower part of this one. Maybe I might go up the side here. And you can see the orange is kind of spilling into there, and I don't want it to. So I'm going to try to use water and my brush to soak up some of that extra. If you ever get too big a petal, remember you could just dry your brush and pick it up like it's a little vacuum. So next I'll go in with a red. My paint's still wet, so it should kind of mix nicely. Again, this lower right half is going to be darker. Maybe a little darker here towards the bottom. Might do a teensy bit of red right in here. And this lower area, obviously it'd be darker on the inside. I don't know if you guys can see, as I'm laying the red in, I'm kind of pulling it around in my wet paint that's already on my page. The wet and the wet into wet kind of does that on its own. But if you want, say, a little bit more help from it, you can always pull it where you might want it. So maybe like under that petal, I'll pull it in a little bit and get some water and gently mix it in. And I'm gonna do a little bit right over here. There we go. I kind of don't like how red this is in here, so I might try to soak up a little bit of that. And I might even try to reorient it back into a brighter orange. And put a little more orange in here as well. I'm just trying to make it look as natural as possible. You know, how light would hit it. You can see these are starting to dry, and I still like that the color's pretty vibrant. That makes me happy. I don't like how dark my pencil lines are. I drew a little too dark. So I'm pretty happy with that third flower there. I'm going to start on my next one here. Same thing with our yellow. Making sure it's wet. Looks like I need to mix up a little more of my medium orange. Should have had that ready. I don't want my paint to dry. So I'll quickly mix that up. And let's see, darker on this one would be kind of over here on this side. Maybe in the middle a bit, this outer petal. And maybe in this inner corner. Just letting the very tips of the petals stay the lighter yellow color. Go in with my darker orange along the base here, along the outer right side. Say underneath the little lip there. So going along the edge, lower part in there. And then I think I'll just do a teensy bit of the red color just on this outer side. And so I want you guys to see that. Basically, my paint's not super wet there. It just is a straight line. But because it's still wet, I can go in and kind of smudge it up a little bit. So then it looks more natural. And I can even bring it around to the bottom. Shadows typically aren't going to be a straight line, especially on something natural like this. So you do want it to be curved. You don't want it to be just a, say, straight line up the middle. You want it to kind of hug the petal shape because it is a round shape. And I think I'll actually add just a tiny bit right under here where we could get a shadow coming off that outer edge. Those are so bright. Love the color. It's almost even brighter than this one, holding it next to each other. I think this paper must have been not as good a quality. It does matter a lot. I can't say I could suggest one just because I've tried so many different types and I don't usually look at what it is, but I would say probably less textured is better, because then you don't get any weird marks under your paint. So I'm pretty happy with that one. I'm going to move on to my next one down here, lowest one, starting with my yellow. And if we're new to watercolors or new to, art in general, don't be afraid to experiment, with the way colors mix, different washes, how you can maybe create a gradual shade, things like that. Because that's really important to understand, say, how your paints work, how the paper works, how things might turn out if you're doing, a big painting. So I've got my yellow. I'm gonna start with my lighter orange. Would be this underside, backside in here, and then kind of in the middle area, kind of forking out all directions. And you can see that color change really isn't that big, but it just allows me to gradually go darker rather than just starting from yellow and going to orange. So just allows a little bit more mixing. Now I have my orange color going at the bottom. I'm going to do this whole kind of petal shape here on the side as my darkest point. And similar thing, coming kind of forking up in all directions on my petals. Next is a little red, bottom and right. Lower. I'm going to do kind of right on the edge here, a little bit of darker color as well. And then it started to dry up there. So what I would do is get my brush wet, dry it just a little bit, and then just go right along the edge to get some water in there so then it gently mixes. And I think I need a little bit darker right here in the middle. Okay, that looks pretty good. And there we've finished our poppies. Now, if you see yours drying and you don't really like, the color or the gradient, remember you can't really go backwards. Can't go, too lighter, but you could always go a little bit darker, and perhaps maybe the lighter areas would stand out a little bit. But I am pretty happy with the way my colors have blended with that wet into wet technique. And our next thing will be our leaves. So we want to mix quite a bit of green color. Now the poppies kind of have a weird stem and leaf color. It is a bit blue. So I'm going to use my tray and I'm going to put quite a bit of water into it because I need quite a bit of paint. I'm going to start with green, but then I'm going to add a little bit of blue into it as well. And then if we use our color wheel, it would be an orange or a red that would help us to make it a little bit duller. But I'm going to start with green. And I already had a bit of green in there, so that's why that color so quickly. From when I painted the sample, I didn't clean the lid. Now, I'm sure you guys can see that's like a really bright green, and I definitely don't want it that green. I'm gonna start with blue. And then the complementary of blue is orange, and the complementary of green would be red. I'm gonna see what happens if I add a little bit of orange in there, because I don't want it that bright. I want it to be a little bit more gray. I'm careful, I'm getting green inside my orange. Clean your brush before you pick up, especially if you're using such different colors, because otherwise your orange will turn gray. All right, can you see how that's just a little bit more dull, not quite so bright? Do want it to be a bit bluer though. Okay, more orange. And I should have brought in a poppy like stem so we can kind of see the color comparison. See how close we are. Now, one thing that's really nice to have when you are painting watercolors, especially if you're, say, copying something, is to have an extra sheet, like little slice of the watercolor paper that you're using. I have this whole open side, so I'm actually going to test out my color over there so I can see what it would look like. I'm going to add a little bit more blue into it. Even more. Again, you don't have to try to do exactly as me. If you're happy with the green you mixed, that's totally fine. I'm gonna be a little bit more picky. Okay, I think I like that. I think that's maybe not too bright. It's a nice, natural looking green. And we will start with our stems. I'm just gonna basically trace over them, try to keep it pretty thin and even thickness. I don't want it to be thicker in another spot. And I'm just actually gonna start from the bottom here and follow my lines that I painted. And my poppies are still a little bit wet, so I want to make sure that I'm not touching my wet paint. I'm being extra careful with my hand, making sure I'm not running my hand into my wet paint. And then right here where I actually would go behind, I'm going to be really careful not to go into the stem. Now again, however you guys laid out your stems and where you're going to put your leaves, it's kind of up to you, whatever you might like. As we're painting it, you might see you want more, or you might want less. That looks pretty good to me. And the reason I'm not painting in these ovals quite yet is because that poppy paint is still wet. So I don't want to accidentally start mixing it, because this is one thing I do not want the wet into wet to accidentally go into. Now, poppy leaves are kind of very like fan-like. So I'm going to start here, and I'm just going to start doing a bunch of lines coming off them. To both sides, almost like if you think of like a pine kind of tree. And then we're going to do another layer on top of this so they don't look quite so perfect. Let's see, do some off here. So I'm basically just going from the middle and going outwards with my paint. Now, if you want to use the brush, going from the inward outwards will look more leaf-like, but that's not always an option when you have to tilt your paper, or if say you're going around something. I don't like how close this is to the edge, and I feel like it should spill out, so I'm actually gonna bring this out a little bit more. One thing that a lot of painters, when they get nervous and new and drawing things layered on top of each other, kind of gets confusing. But know that it's okay to go behind things, on top of things. You want to try to separate it, but that's not always very natural looking. So this coming out just feels better rather than being right up close to the edge. So I'm just using, the shape of my brush to get these kind of leaf shapes, layering in maybe thicker ones with thinner ones. And, I'm jumping between them all. If I don't like the way one looks, I'm going back in it to it again, maybe adding a bit more, making it longer, darker. Remember, with watercolors, we start lighter and then we go darker. So actually on top of these, we might use a bit darker green and just go over a couple of them darker, so then they're not just all one color. Give it some tone, some shade. That's really what's gonna make this drawing look really good. Give it depth. Kind of want this one to go down, and because I'm so close to the edge here, I might just bring it down past my frame a little bit. And definitely watercolors is all about layers. You got lots of layers, giving it depth and interest. Oop, watch your wrist. Try not to get it in your wet paint. I just kind of touched mine. Okay, pretty happy with that first layer here. Gonna go over a couple areas. A little bit more. And then just in like a corner of my tray here, I'm gonna go in darker. I'm gonna make this a darker green. I'm actually gonna use blue and then my orange. And that'll just darken it up a little bit. So then I'm gonna go on top of it, just in certain little areas where I wanna highlight it. Go a little bit darker. If it's still wet, that's fine. It can mix nice naturally. And if you want to go, and thinking about light, where your light's coming from, you can go where areas where it'd be darker. So on the lower kind of right side, where it would be further away from the sun. Lower down here would be darker. This one doesn't look quite so fluffy down here. I want to make it look a little fluffier. So I hope you guys can see some of that difference, the change of the first green compared to the second green I used. Now with the darker green, I'm actually gonna paint in those tops of those little stems. So I'm just gonna use it, and hopefully our poppies are pretty dry by now that it doesn't bleed too much, but you do want it to kind of touch a little bit, right? Because it's not floating. So make sure it touches down and it touches the flower petals up. I'm just gonna go around to each of my flowers and paint in that little shape at the bottom. And if you need to kind of maybe make your stem look like it fits a little more, bring darker color into it. Usually the stem is a bit thicker at the top, so you can kind of maybe pull it out so it's more, you know, triangling upward. Okay. Then I got a little puddle right there. I'm going to soak that up. We are almost done. We'll move on to our last step, which will be framing in everything. And for that, on this one, I used a blue-green color, just to kind of, you know, follow this color that I used. And also our poppies are kind of a red-orange color, and the complement on a color wheel of red-orange would be blue-green. So they kind of complement each other. They create a nice balance. Those do happen to be my favorite colors also. So I'm actually going to use the same blue-green that I mixed here for my background, but I'm just going to make it darker and brighter. So we'll mix up that. I want it to stand out. Nice blue color. Now I have a purple in my palette, and that purple might give me like a little bit of difference, kind of give it a little bit warm color. So I might add, yeah, I like the way that's mixing, just makes it, gives it that kind of red warm tint that I might want. You can see that's just a little bit darker. Test it over here on the side. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So for our frame, this is where we want to be really careful. Hopefully we have a nice clear line to follow, but remember, we're going to be what I call bumping and jumping everything that's overlapping our frame. We also want to try to make it as straight as possible because we want it to look like a perfect square or rectangle. So I'm going to be really careful, try to keep my brush really steady. I don't want it to wiggle. And I'm going to try to do a bit of a thinner line. I don't want it to be too thick. So I'm going to make sure I got my paint. And I'm going to start somewhere where hopefully my paint's not wet. So I think maybe I'm going to start between here and here. And I'm just going to try to be so steady and careful, following that straight line I have. And it bumps into there. I'm going to come down here as well. And obviously we want to be on the outside of our background color. Just got a little wiggly in here. It's okay if it's wiggly. I always say that's what makes it look handmade. If we wanted it printed, we would print it, but nope, we are hand painting this. So it should look slightly hand painted. Now, if you think you like maybe a bit thicker of a frame, that's totally fine. You can maybe do two goes around with your paints. I kind of have a weird corner right there. Oh well. And you can see how I'm just trying to bump and jump anything that's coming out of my frame. And I probably should have started on this side, so then if I had wet paint, I didn't smudge it, but I did not plan ahead enough to do that. And I don't know actually if this kind of technique where you have things spilling out of a frame has a official name. But oh man, I just smudged it right there. Shoot. Careful. Anyway, I like the way it looks. It just makes it feel like it's coming towards you. It's really bright and happy. I am gonna try to soak up that little spill with my paper towel. I'm just gonna press it really hard down on it. No, didn't do anything. Okay, oh well. And actually, maybe I might have it where some of the plant coming over. That kind of looks cool. All right, one little bit to go right there. There we are. So now what I would kind of see or check is if there's anywhere where maybe it looks a little bit thinner. To me right here looks, just a teensy bit thinner than up there. So I might do a second go around. Let's give it a little more beef. And kind of where it meets the things that I'm bumping and jumping, it's a bit thinner and then it gets thicker as I keep going. So I might kind of go over the places where it meets. And if you did do 2 layers somewhere and didn't do one somewhere else, it will be a little bit lighter. So you might want to just go over, if you've gone over one area, you might as well just go over everything, because then the color will be a little more even throughout. Okay, that is really unfortunate. That bothers me a lot, but can't do anything about it. But there we are. If you guys have any last minute questions, any questions about watercolors or the mission, feel free to ask them right now. We'll go ahead and let everyone finish. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. And thank you all who were here. And I hope you have a painting that you are proud of and you learned a little bit as well.